Hey everyone, in this tutorial I'm going to be showing you how to add grid lines and dimensions to start creating the bridge. If we pull up the original drawing here, you see that there aren't actual grid lines, there's just dimensions, but when I was creating the ramp I did add grid lines, and I think it'll make it a lot easier to latch onto all those different nodes and grid lines when necessary to creating the ramp. So we'll start by creating those because you can always hide them later, which I did here. And one other thing that I want to note is that in the drawings that I was given to make this bridge, I was not given all the dimensions, so some of these I had to assume on my own. So I can't guarantee that all of these dimensions will be 100% accurate, but they are very approximate and very close to the correct dimensions, but I'll leave it up to the individual groups if you want to check the dimensions on your own. But for now, I'm just going to be basing it off the one that I already made, so let's get started with the grid lines. Go to Architecture, hit Grid. I'm going to start by just making one vertical grid line. I'm going to rename that to 1. Now, if we go back to here, you'll see that this first grid line here, we're assuming that's right here. The next one will be 22.1 feet over. So if you click this, then copy, you can click anywhere, like anywhere along here is fine, but as long as you move it in a horizontal direction. I'm going to type in 21.1 feet, and there we go. That's 21 feet across now. And notice it won't say 21.1 because the dimensions on here as a default will go to feet and inches and fractions, not decimals, but we can change that later. I'll actually start with the dimensions now. I'm just going to place one here. You notice it says 21 1/4 inches, but now if I click this, I can hit Edit Type, duplicate, and I'm going to change that to custom 1. So to start with, I don't want this in fraction form, I want this in decimals, so I'm going to unclick that, and I'm going to click decimal feet. You can choose how many decimal places. I'm going to change it to 2 decimal places. Click OK, and you notice there's also arrows here, but I prefer having those diagonal lines. So if we go to tick mark, I can change it to diagonal 1/8. Click OK, and there we go, it automatically changed it, so now we have diagonal line and it'll say 21.1 feet instead of fractions, which is what we want. Or at least the dimensions that I was originally given were in decimals. If you do prefer it in fractions, you can always leave it. It's personal preference and how your team wants the drawing to look. Now I'm just going to continue the same pattern with the rest of the grid lines. Let's see. This next one is 4.95 feet. I'm just dimensioning as I go to make sure that everything is right. That's the wrong dimension, so we go back here, we go to Properties, click this box, go down to click Custom 1, and there we go. See, that's the way the properties work, is instead of just, changing it for each individual line, there's several options, there's several default options you can choose from, but we went ahead and created our node, and that will automatically be saved into this model. For all future times we need dimension, it'll be an option. So next it's 44.2. If you understand what I'm doing, you don't need to watch the rest of this video because I'm just going to be repeating this process all the way down the horizontal. And I'm going to go back to this sketch, so just so you notice, you may notice that I'm only going to be doing this long horizontal portion here, not this part of the bridge here, or this diagonal part here. And that's just because I'm only adding these grid lines for reference later on because there are a lot of dimensions here. Whereas for this, we can always edit it later. We don't necessarily need to add grid lines for everything. Like normally if you were creating a building, or you could even leave the grid lines there if you want to, but they're just there for organization. And I don't think it's necessary to add the grid lines for this diagonal portion, but you can if you want to. It's what your group decides is best for you. But I'm just going to be continuing on this horizontal main portion of the bridge here. So after the 4.95, it's 44.3. Then we have 22.1. Then finally 18. And that is all the grid lines. I'm going to go ahead and add these dimensions just to check and make sure everything's right. And that is how you create grid lines in a project.